evening, everyone. I'd like to thank our two panelists for coming tonight. We're going to discuss Hagerstown a little bit. So I'll introduce each one of you. I think everybody knows who you are, but if you could just introduce yourself and say whatever you want. We have the Chief of Police, Joey Kifer, and Hagerstown City Councilwoman Emily Keller. So we'll let ladies go first. Emily, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Emily Keller. I'm serving my first term on the Hagerstown City Council. In my other life, I own a farmer's insurance agency, and I ran for office. I'm born and raised in Hagerstown, and thought we needed younger people in office, thought we needed diversity, women in office, and I really love Hagerstown. I'm hoping that I'm helping make it a better place, and I look forward to continuing to do so. And thank you guys for taking time out of your evening to be here tonight on this cold Monday.
I also would like to thank you for being here and for having us. I'm Joey Kifer. I go by Joey. My first name is Paul. I'm a junior, so I go by Joey, so my mom wouldn't get confused about who she was yelling at when we were kids. I'm chief of police. I've been here for 28 years, born and raised, and it's been the best job I've ever had, and I'm excited about talking to you guys about what's going on here in Hagerstown tonight.
So we generally, and I think you guys know this, we generally try to do our panels centered on our core values of ethics, education, the economy. We decided to talk about Hagerstown a little bit because obviously it's the biggest municipality in the county. It's basically the economic driver in the county. And what we'd really like to talk about is get your views, because you each have a unique perspective as leaders in the community, of kind of where are we now, where are we going, challenges, initiatives to help those challenges, those types of things. So I'm going to start out with sort of a softball, and I'll start with Joey. I'll start with you, but this is for both of you really. Based on where we are right now in Hagerstown, what's your assessment of where we are? And this could be on any number of areas, and we'll drill down into it. But what's your assessment of where we are, and what would you like it to be that it's not right now? So what's the difference really between where we are and where you want to be?
Well, let me give you my perspective of the last 28 years doing this job that I've been doing. So 28 years ago, downtown Hagerstown looked a whole lot different than it looks today. And I'm going to start with downtown Hagerstown because that's what everyone seems to visualize when they think about Hagerstown. Downtown Hagerstown 28 years ago had way more bars than it had churches. It had way more bars than it had a lot of things down here. Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights were busy, and people were getting locked up routinely. As a very young officer, it was a fun place to work. Not understanding what that meant, in terms of the older you get, and understanding that those kind of things are not what you want to see in your community, it was a fun place to work, and people were acting the way they do. So move ahead 28 years, and downtown Hagerstown is a far better place than it ever was, and it's continuing to get better every year. And our crime rate, specifically downtown, is very much near zero, and it has been. When you talk about crime downtown, you're talking about petty stuff. You're talking about petty crime, nuisance crimes, things like that. You're not talking about the big stuff. I brought with me just, we do CompStat every 2 weeks. It's computer statistics. And we review what has happened in the last 2 weeks so we can plan for the next 2 weeks. So we follow that dragon, so to speak, and we try to correct along the way. And that's our short-term, 2-week period of time. But we review over the course of that year-to-date and over a 5-year average of where we are. So we look at things. Here's what we look at. We look at homicides, rapes, robberies, aggravated assaults, burglaries, thefts, vehicle thefts, and weapon offenses. So to give you a perspective, over the last 5 years, we are down 25% on homicides. We're down 19% on rapes, 14% in robberies. Aggravated assaults were down 20%. We broke even with burglaries, and we're down 16% with thefts. Vehicle thefts were up by 4%. We essentially went from 91 to 95 over that course of that time period, and we're up 30% in our weapons offenses. We went from 60 to 78. So percentage-wise, it sounds like a big number, but we went up 18 in 5 years. 18 offenses in 5 years. So it's not something that's dramatic. Our crime rate here in Hagerstown and in Washington County is that has been at an all-time low for the last 10 years. It literally does this when you watch the curve of crime. Nationwide, we're down for the most part. Some areas have a little more problems than others, but all in all, crime is down. And I always challenge people when they say they're afraid. I ask the question, and a lot of times in groups like this, how many people have been a victim of violent crime? And I never see a hand go up. How many people know someone that's been a victim of a violent crime, not domestic related, and I never see a hand go up. But yet everyone's afraid. Everyone's afraid because it's what you're primed for. It's what you see on the news media. If it bleeds, it reads, and so that's what you get. It's what we all get. So we all walk around in a lot more fear than what we probably should be. But the reality is that crime downtown is nothing. But yet we get a lot of not seeing cops downtown, wanting to see more cops downtown, and I get it, and I understand it. It's a perception issue. But across the rest of the city, same thing. If you go into the north end, the crime rate out there is essentially the same: petty crimes, thefts, things like that, crimes of opportunity. We do have some issues. We do have some youth gang issues and some violence that's growing in our youth community, our impoverished youth community. But we've been working on some different incentives and initiatives for that, which we'll talk about in a little while. So
Yeah, I want to follow back up on the reduction of crime, but I want to get to Emily, and then we'll kind of swing back to that. So, Emily, what are your thoughts on where are we now, and what would you like to see? What's the difference there?
So where are we now? To be honest, I think we're a lot better than most people think we are, because we get a lot of bad press. And I'm just curious, in this room, how many of you are surprised by the crime statistics that he just said? Was that a better picture than what you thought? I think most everyone would think that, because unfortunately all we see on the paper is mugshot after mugshot after mugshot, which makes us appear to be very dangerous. And if you ever notice, the crime could be committed in Smithsburg or Clear Spring or anywhere else in the county, and the headline reads Hagerstown area man or Hagerstown area woman. So even if it's not happening in Hagerstown or those people aren't from Hagerstown, that's what the headline always reads, which makes it very difficult to combat from a perspective angle. But I think we are on the cusp of something very good. I think with the Maryland Theater finally being done, or very close to being done, and with the Urban Improvement Project, we have about $64 million going into downtown Hagerstown right now, between the Maryland Theater, the Barbara Ingram expansion, the expansion of the colleges, investment into some of the old buildings that were vacant for a very long time. And I really think that that is going to turn the tide of what is happening down here, increase the foot traffic that we all desperately want to see. And aside from just downtown, the city has been working diligently with the county to try to get some of these old vacant buildings back on the tax rolls. So we're looking at a program modeled off of Dorchester County, where these properties that go up for chronic tax sale year after year after year after year and just stay vacant, some of them have $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 worth of liens on them from abatements and from unpaid taxes. So we're working on a program that would alleviate that, allow the city to take ownership of those buildings and then sell them to an investor or to a nonprofit that can flip them, or just to get them back into working order. And if they need to be knocked down, we'll knock them down. If they can go back to being on the tax roll, we'll put them on the tax roll. That is something I think is going to improve our community greatly. I think all of us that live in Hagerstown can point to that one house on our street that needs to come down or needs something done with it. And chances are, if you look on the SSTAT, probably has $60,000, $70,000 worth of tax liens. So we're working diligently with the county. We're going to try our first 3 sometime within this year, and I think that's going to be a huge win for our community to really improve community relationships, improve our quality of life, and improve our tax base, which we all need to.
So, Joey, you mentioned the reduction in crime, and it's at a low. You mentioned the urban development project. So, to me, and this is for both you guys really, the crime has been reduced. There's an opioid issue, which I know Emily has championed and trying to fix that and taking it on. And then there's been the economic driver of the downtown bit as well. So for me, a lot of those things, and tell me if I'm wrong, and what's the connection really of a strong economy generally, I think, helps in reducing crime, and they were setting the tone for reducing crime and people not being on drugs. Is that incorrect? Is that true? Is there any tie to that? Are they sort of all together?
I think people need opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
People where there's high level of poverty, there's a lot of times high level of mental health issues, which always in turn means high level of addiction, high level of overdoses. People who are struggling need hope, and I think the more jobs that we can offer, the more opportunities we can offer, the more opportunity it provides someone to go back to being a thriving member of society. This isn't an easy fix, but I do think the opioid epidemic ties into the majority of the issues that we're having here as a community. It ties into the homeless issue, it ties into the petty theft issue, it ties into the quality of life issues that we're having. So we really need to address the opioid and the mental health crisis head on. Washington County only has one provider that provides juvenile and adolescent mental health service. That's a huge issue. Our kids are struggling and there's nowhere to send them. Same for adult services. It's not just Washington County, there's a shortage of providers all over the United States. And until we can address that issue, provide funding for that, and of course that's way above our pay grade, that's coming from federal and state, but I think the more we hammer away at the opioid epidemic, which as a county we are doing a very, very good job at, will help solve a lot of those underlying issues as well.
And I agree. The only difference or the caveat is with the opioid epidemic, poverty and economic development really doesn't have anything to do with that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, with the opioid epidemic, prescription medication starts a lot of that through legitimate means. Someone gets injured, they have to go for surgery, they get put on a prescription medication, they start to take it a little bit more than they should because of the pain, and then before you know it, they've taken it long enough that they become dependent on it, and then some of those people become addicted. So that's a little different variation of that. The underlying aspect of crime and other addiction, I would say poverty has a lot to do with that. And I'm not blaming people who are poor for doing that. It becomes a societal issue. And if we in this room grew up in an environment that is normalized in your family life or your community where these things are expected of you, and you become expected to be less than someone else, you feel that in your being, then going out and doing the things that you do to survive becomes okay to you and normalized to you. And so I'm not defending that. I'm not saying that that's proper, but that becomes the psyche of a lot of people. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that kind of trauma from poverty causes that. And so we see that in our kids that go to Antietam Academy. I'm sure that people in here, when you think of a kid going to Antietam Academy, you think, oh, that's the kid got thrown out of another school because of they're bad, they're not very good kids. And there's a lot of kids that go to Antietam Academy that did have something bad happen at a home school, but had the ability to go back, chose to stay because it's a better learning environment for them, and they're actually getting a better education, and they're growing better and being better to society because of being in Antietam Academy. But they carry that stigma with them all the time, that I'm an Antietam Academy student, so therefore I'm not expected to college, I'm not expected to be a good kid, I'm not expected to succeed. So that's where that implicit bias that's imposed upon them by society in general causes that issue. So
will you explain for anybody who doesn't know what Antietam Academy is? Can you just explain what that is?
Antietam Academy is the alternative school here in Washington County for middle and high school kids. Alternative being a lot of those kids get removed from their home school for some offense that's bad enough to get them removed. They can't be kicked out of school, so they go to Antietam Academy. At Antietam Academy, there are some kids that are very bad kids that go there. Some, when I hate to use that word, but kids that have committed crimes, kids that are had some violent history. But a lot of the kids out there just have learning disabilities and things like that cause them to do things at their home school that was disruptive.
Okay.
The teachers in the home schools aren't as equipped to handle kids like that as the teachers and the staff at Antietam Academy. So having those kids go there, they get an opportunity, they get a chance. and they have a principal out there, Principal Morrow, that loves every one of those kids and does everything he can along with his staff to give these kids the opportunity that they need. And one of the things that we talk about all the time now when it talks about our youth is that our society's put so much expectation on college bound, college education. And for a lot of kids, that's never going to happen.
Right.
They don't see that in their future. They don't feel that they could ever do that, so they never strive for that. And what have we done is that we've caused those kids now to walk away from their education with a feeling of despair,
right.
lack of hope. So they don't go out and provide themselves. So, being a tradesman, doing those things that can provide a really good life for you is not being pushed in our society like it used to be.
Right.
And we were in Hagerstown, Indiana, just back over the summer, doing a visit to our sister city, and one of the schools we went to, they have that in their schools still. I mean, I think most of us remember home ec and those classes, metal class and all that stuff in school. We don't have those here anymore, but they do out there. And it's a thriving part of their education is to have those students want to be auto mechanics and things like that. I just think we've provided a vacuum in our society, and Hagerstown and Washington County's done that as well, just because we were moving in a path that we thought was the right path. I think going backwards a little bit is probably a good thing for our society as a whole in moving forward, because the future, whatever we're going to do and change, is with those kids that are in elementary school now.
Right.
Not the kids that are in high school right now. It's those kids in elementary school that's got to start making that change.
So those are great points. I would like to dive back into the opioid thing, though, because we sort of touched on it, and we're just going to keep bobbing and weaving here, I think, for a little bit. Emily, Washington Goes Purple, you've championed it. It was sort of your brainchild. I know everywhere. I mean, it looked like little Baltimore after the Super Bowl, for the longest time, because everything was purple.
Little Baltimore in a good way.
In a good way,
yeah,
the good parts of Baltimore.
Yeah.
But I mean, what's your assessment of the impact of that and that effort? And then I guess, is it a continuing effort? Is it what are the next steps? Because I mean, I saw, everywhere I'd see you on Facebook, like, hey, come out and help us grab drugs,
Yes.
But it was like a turn-in thing. So I know there were a lot of people that really bought into that and did it. But I mean, can you give us sort of an update on that and what your plan is going forward?
Absolutely. So Washington Goes Purple is a preventive measure. Our tagline is prevent addiction. We sat in all these meetings, the opioid task force meetings, opioid senior policy group meetings, insert acronym here, opioid related meetings, and we're pouring all this money into treatment, and we're looking at the numbers, and it's not working. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. So we really had to take a step back about 2 years ago and think, what are we doing wrong? Where are we missing the boat here? And a sheriff in Talbot County started looking into it, and then it's kind of taken off all across the state. But what we realized is that we're neglecting our kids. There was a severe lack of drug education in our schools. The Washington County Public Schools does do drug education in 10th grade. That is entirely too late. And what we found polling kids across the state was their parents were talking to them about alcohol and marijuana and drugs in general, but not specifically about prescription painkiller abuse. And the leading cause of prescription painkiller abuse in teens is wisdom teeth surgery. They're being prescribed an opioid, and then they get addicted, and eventually leads down this path that we all know too well. So we kind of set out to educate the community about the dangers of prescription painkiller abuse, provide resources so parents were comfortable having that conversation, and then talking to the community about locking up their medication, properly disposing of it. We've been doing walking take-backs, like you said, where it's literally a uniformed police officer, a volunteer, normally someone from the fire department, and we're going door to door, providing information about Washington Goes Purple, and then offering to take any unused or unwanted medication from them. We didn't know how successful it would be. If you guys ever want an entertaining experience, knock on people's doors with a uniformed police officer, because it's quite entertaining. But I mean, our first time that we did it, in 2.5 hours in the south end of Hagerstown, we collected 130 pounds of medication. Like, literally trash bags full that people had sitting in their cabinets. We've done it all over Hagerstown. We've done it in Boonesboro. It's been very successful. If people don't have unused or unwanted medication, it provides a good police interaction because people want to see police officers in their community. It also provides us an opportunity to provide information about Washington Goes Purple, provide the drop box locations, and just expand our footprint. We do have a formal partnership with Washington County Public Schools, so we're in every elementary, middle, and high. The health department prevention team has 52 weeks of messaging that they've provided to the school system that's being delivered to the kids. Then we have 3 pilot schools, which is Bestar Elementary, Western Heights Middle School, and North High. And we're doing more programming in those schools. So we're trying different things. We're trying events with police officers. Bestar's doing a lot of things with our fire department because little kids love firemen. They bring the trucks, and it provides an opportunity for them to really have their undivided attention. In the high schools, we're doing panels with speakers in recovery and with law enforcement and with volunteers. And we're going to go back at the end of each year and figure out what was impactful, what wasn't, and then tailor the education piece moving forward. So it absolutely is an all-year thing. September is Recovery Month, so that's the big purple push. I think that visual awareness worked because if you didn't know why everything was purple, you were going to go home and figure out why. And that's exactly what we wanted to happen. We heard the naysayers of like, what does turning everything purple do? I mean, okay, I hear you. It creates a conversation, a much needed conversation in the community. And because of that awareness, because of what we were able to do, we got the business community on board. We got the faith-based community on board. We got the recovery community on board. We had people coming to our events saying, hey, I have 72 hours clean. And they felt comfortable telling us that. Or, hey, I have a week clean. I have 30 days clean. Here's the program I've been working. And I think for the people who needed that hope, it provided an opportunity to say, hey, our whole community cares. Like, look at these 500 people that showed up for this recovery walk. People really care about my health. And that they needed that hope. But then for the people in recovery, or for the parent whose child is struggling, or the child whose parent is struggling, they really got to see, like, we're going to get through this. And it's going to take this massive community effort, but we're going to get through it. And I think with that drilling in younger and more often, as often and consistent as possible, all of the health department programs are coming under the purple umbrella because we think that brand awareness is important. So this isn't just like me and Chief out there running our mouths with purple one. I mean, this is like
Right.
a true, like the health department prevention team is doing things under the purple umbrella. Law enforcement, everyone's just kind of joining forces under one unified front to say, hey, we're going to make a dent in this and we're going to do it loudly.
So one of the things, and I think it's been impressive. I mean, the word you hear on the street about the work that you guys have done on that is just impressive. I mean, it's like if we can get that kind of energy across the whole county, then it would the sky's the limit really on it. One of the things that I hear a lot is people talk about they believe that the homeless situation, that the homeless population is going up percentage-wise in town. So I'd like you guys to sort of address that. There was an article in Fox News Baltimore, I think, recently about a grant that got approved to have some homeless people, and you guys know this better than I do, to pay them to pick up trash. We all know the story about the rocks that were placed under the I guess the bypass off Washington, whatever it was. So I guess could you guys address, is it really becoming a huge issue, or is it not as big as we think? And if so, can you talk about that? And also, Joey, I'd like to spin back at some point. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what steps you guys did? Because you talked about the low crime rate. So can you address sort of what you did there?
Sure.
So however you guys want to jump into that. That was about 6 questions in one. Sorry about that.
Well, let me first talk about the homeless issue and the rocks under the bridge on Antietam Street. So most of you are aware, you would drive by there and you'd see the young lady under the bridge and her growing mass of stuff that was being dropped off by good doers here in our community and people that meant well. But when you start bringing high wingback chairs to an outdoor space and bringing canned hams that can never be eaten and cases and cases and cases of water, you were not doing her any good. You were doing her more harm than you were good. Captain Alexander and myself would go by there on a daily basis and help keep her stuff together and keep things going. And what we saw when we went by there was people would stop in the middle of the road in their cars, and almost get rear-ended by other cars, and it started to become very dangerous. And we've had some serious accidents on that intersection. Just had one here last week, and it became to a point where she couldn't be there for her own safety. So for homeless people, most homeless people want to be homeless in a very public space because they feel safe. If you're walking downtown and there's 1,000 people walking around downtown like they were the other night at the MSO concert, you feel very comfortable. If you go to Baltimore to the Inner Harbor at 11 o'clock at night, on any given night, you probably feel pretty comfortable walking around the Inner Harbor because there's thousands of people walking around legitimately using the space. Homeless people are the same way. If they're hidden, if they're off the beaten path, then they're targets for crime. They're targets for people that don't take advantage of that. And unfortunately, it's happened to that young lady before. She's been assaulted and had some things happen to her, but it became dangerous. So the rocks were preventative measures to keep anyone from using that space in that way because it was just too dangerous. And in the same way, we wanted to use something that represented the railroad and that kind of thing. So if you look at that, it looks very much what the railroad ties and the rocks. But I know we got beat up on that as being anti-homeless and things like that, but we were doing everything we could to keep that space usable for her in a way that was legally allowed to do by her. It just became too dangerous. So we made those moves to do that. Homelessness here in Hagerstown and Washington County is growing. It is growing. It's growing in a way that not necessarily what you see. What you see is the chronic homeless, the people that are extremely mentally ill, that want no help, that don't want services provided to them, that live the way they do because of their issues. But homelessness is growing in a way that you don't see. And there's a lot of families, there's hundreds of kids that go to school every day that are homeless. But homelessness isn't always about living under a bridge or living in the woods. It's about living on someone's couch for the night, and next week you're living on someone else's couch. And it may be a family member, but you're homeless. You're bouncing around. It's growing here. It's growing across the country. It's growing everywhere. And it is not an easy thing to fix. It's definitely not a police issue, although we're the ones that are tasked with trying to fix it. Kudos to city government for taking on the avenue of hiring some of the homeless to work on things that help beautify the city, but in the same way, provide them some sense of belonging and purpose. And that's what it's done. You know, the value's been more on the helping of that human being than it's been on the cleaning up of trash in the city. I guarantee you no one here can see, oh, there's the place where they went and cleaned up all the trash. You're not going to notice that. But you go talk to those people that are actually hired by the city doing that, and you'll see a difference in their psyche and who they are. It just provides that needed sense of belonging and self-worth. And for homeless people, it's hard. It's hard to get a job. It's hard to do those things because where are you getting your mail? You know, when you go to apply for that job, you got to put something on that application.
Right.
And as soon as your employer sees you're homeless, there's a reason why you're homeless. I'm not going to take a chance on you. And that's unfortunate,
Right.
Because a large part of the homeless population have just run into bad luck. They've had some issues. A lot of the gentlemen you'll see around town, they work every day, full-time jobs. They just don't have enough money to get that deposit to get into a place to live. They stay at the rescue mission, and there's a policy there: you're on for 30 days, you're out for 30 days. And sometimes they're out 30 days, so they're finding any place they can to sleep until they get up and go to the next job, being a flagman or whatever they're doing. But it's a sad state that we have that kind of issue in our country, but it's a reality of what we have. But I give a lot of credit to Councilman McIntyre, who headed up that program, and I'd love to see that continue and actually expand, because I think it's been a huge success.
Can you add something to that, Emily?
Yeah, I think the Bridge to Change program has so far been a success and will continue to be. There's also been a lot of talks about affordable housing. And I know I've sat in meetings with the CAC and Goodwill and some other providers. We went and toured a couple facilities to look at almost like a transitional housing place for someone who is homeless but needs to save up for a down payment. I mean, remember the Garden Plaza Hotel that we shut down due to health concerns about a year and a half ago? There were, what was it, 45 families living there, paying $1,600 a month. That's more than my mortgage. But they were paying that to live in that hotel because they have past medical bills that prevents them from getting an apartment. They have past electric bills that they can't get electric put in their name until they pay the past due. They can't save for a down payment. I mean, can you imagine having a family paying that much money to live in one hotel room with no kitchen? And that's the environment that they were in. So there's resources going into looking to see how they can help with situations like that, where they have the means to pay month to month, but they don't have the ability to get something in their own name. Maybe transitional housing is the answer. I get tagged all the time in tiny home villages that have been successful across the country. So we've sat down with Jordy Newman at CAC to explore that opportunity. Is that an answer for Hagerstown? We don't have a lot of land because we are densely populated, and HUD really wants permanent housing. They want to fund in more permanent housing, and the tiny home model isn't exactly what they're looking for. But we're definitely exploring different housing options to try to help people into a position that gets them the ability to have an address, to get a job, transportation, to get an ID, things that we take for granted. That is just makes it very difficult for them. I met with a lady that runs the veterans program the other day, and she was explaining a day in the life of a homeless person that she deals with, and she was saying, they have to be out by 7 o'clock. Then if they want a hot breakfast, they have to be at this location by 8. Then if they want to take a shower, they have to be at Turning Point between 8 and 12. Then if they want to have a hot meal for lunch, they have to be at another location at 1. Then in order to get back in the shelter, they have to be on the other side of town in line by 4. And it's like you spend your whole day just trying to provide yourself with food and water and shelter. But we expect them then to go get jobs and go write a resume and go get services, and we wonder why it's a struggle for them. So this is a big issue, not just in our community, and it's going to take a lot of community partners and resources working together to help solve it.
And we're meeting, the city administrator had tasked me with putting together a smaller group. I sit on the Homeless Coalition, and so I have a smaller group that I've worked with for some of the visuals that you guys have seen, getting a couple of those people help that were the most visible in our community. And the barriers she talks about are very real. The young lady was under the bridge over on Franklin Street, for instance, that had people coming by with her, had a shopping cart. The reason why she wouldn't go to the meetings she had to go to is because where's she going to put her shopping cart? That was her whole life. Everything she owned was in that shopping cart. You can't take it into a building. You can't take it into the Department of Social Services to get your food stamps. You can't do those things because you're not going to park it outside or it's going to disappear. So she stayed with her stuff. Families do the same thing. They can't go to these meetings. They can't go to get what they need because what are they going to do with their kids?
Right.
And so barriers that we don't think about because we have the resources, family, friends, and others that can take care of some of these things for us to allow us to go do those things become huge, impossible barriers for people to get over. And then they start to just become normalized in that this is where I'm at. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to live here. And it's been that way. So we're working on had our first meeting last month with a smaller group, and some of the things that we're looking at is along the lines of the vacant houses and trying to find a way or a mechanism to get some of those houses to some of these organizations, to get some of these families into home ownership and not just rentals. It's taking that homelessness and moving it into something a lot different. I don't know where that's going to go, but I'm excited that I have a city administrator and Councilman Alshire sits on that. And it was very exciting to hear some of the things he had to say at that meeting. We have another meeting coming up soon, and so it's exciting to see the mentality change of people in power looking to try to find unique and innovative ways to solve some of these problems. It's not going to solve everything. I mean, we're talking, when you got 100 people that are homeless and we can help 5, but it's still 5 people that you're going to help out of that circumstance. It's a start. We got to start somewhere, and that's where those are those things that, for me, after 28 years of looking at the worst of society on a daily basis, essentially, Those are where I get my spark to keep moving and keep going forward, and try to get other people spark like that, that they go, hey, this is where it's at. That's why it's infectious to sit next to her at Washington Goes Purple meetings. You know, no one has that spark like she has, and it's like the Energizer Bunny. You feel it, and it makes you want to do that. So
your new nickname Sparkles.
Yeah,
but I heard been a Sparkles, but all right.
But it's those things that we're trying, and I know that the city government's trying to work with the county government on some of those things to help us out with that as well.
Yeah, and I want to talk about city and county in a minute, but one of the things you also talked about, and I promised I would, was you talked about vacant buildings, and this is a somewhat related topic, but you know, and you and I had a conversation about the West End last week, just a philosophical discussion, and it sort of ties in there. So anybody who goes downtown can see that in the last, I guess, 12 to 24 months, really the improvements that have happened downtown. If you start Potomac Street and the square and Washington Street and work your way out. I mean, you guys have done, as a city administration, you guys have really done, you can tell when you talk about the theater, Mulberry Loft, some of the restaurants that are down there. It looks to me, and tell me if this is different, that and it sounds like it's a smart way of doing it, you're starting downtown and you're working, trying to, not only from a aesthetics point of view, but arts, economic drivers, you're trying to build something downtown and then work its way out. So that to me seems like a win. But then I guess the follow on to that is there are other communities, and you and I talked about the West End in particular. Are you seeing other, I guess my point is, it seems like downtown seems like a victory that's continuing to grow and improve. But are you seeing other parts of town, north, south, east, west, that are focus areas, primary, or are you just looking at everything in general?
Well, I think downtown was the focus for so long, and you're right, there's more to Hagerstown than downtown.
Right.
I think every area of town you can go to and find something that needs fixed. You can go to the south end and see the house on Summit Avenue that needed to come down that's finally gone. You can go to the north end and find houses that have been vacant and are dilapidated. The west end has its fair share of issues. That's where we've seen a lot of the youth stuff that is going on. I think that is probably our biggest area of concern right now is the West End.
Okay.
Just getting a sense of community pride back there, which Chief and I are actually having a meeting for the West End Wednesday night regarding this exact issue, because there were some homeowners that reached out that said, hey, we really want to instill a sense of community back in this part of town. We're here, we love this area, we live here, our homes are here, how can we clean it up and how can we get people to want to invest? And part of that is part of the vacant house issue that we've had. And you walk down Elizabeth Street and Madison Street and you can see, this house is nice, this house is nice, these next 3 houses are falling down and have been vacant for years. So that goes back to this tax sale property of, can we acquire that? Is it worth saving? Do we knock it down and make it a park? Mm-hmm. Do we knock it down, quick claim it to the neighbor and they'll have a big yard? What do you do with those properties? But sitting and letting them deteriorate is doing no one any good.
And it's all doable. For those of us in this room that remember the housing projects, the West End housing projects, when that got tore down and they built Gateway, and it was going to be home ownership, rental, and Section 8 housing all combined, scattered throughout. I was a naysayer. I thought that's never going to work. That's never going to happen. No one's ever going to buy a place and do all that. But it works. And that community is no different than any other community in terms of crime and issues. It's the same. It's not worse. It's not better. It's normal. It's a normal community. Where I think the West End is one of the neighborhoods. My parents still live in the West End. I got aunts and uncles that live in the West End. I was born and raised and lived in the West End. So I'm in the West End a lot when I go visit my mom and my dad. And the neighborhood feels like it's changed, but that change really, I believe, my heart has been, it went from home ownership to rental community. And when you're generally the rental community, for me, at least from my experience, the issues that are problematic issues are people that don't have they have no say in the community, or they have no stay in the community. They're just there. And so finding good tenants, and I'm not putting all renters in that category, believe me, there's a lot of, I don't want to promote that just because we have renters that are all bad. I'm saying the ones that do cause the harms that are in the rental, they're not ambassadors from that community.
Right.
So one of the things that we've done in the last couple of years is we did the crime-free multi-housing initiative, and we expanded it to every property in the city, and we hold property owners accountable for the activities that happen on their property, whether you're the owner occupant or you're owning it and you're renting it. And in the beginning, it was thought that it was going to be a big problem, and we were going to be punishing all these landlords and property owners. And the reality is, it didn't. It was never designed that way. It was designed that if you owned a piece of property and you were renting to someone, that you couldn't just rent and walk away and go, I just want my money, and I don't care what happens on there. Just don't destroy my property. Anything else, that's society's problem. And when we started to do that, we found that our problem locations, our historically problem property owners, started taking care of their business, and we modeled it after the housing program. Essentially, housing, you go to any housing, Nolan or any of those places, and their crime rates are very low because they have long-term tenants. And if you're someone that lives in one of those properties and your grandson, your granddaughter comes over and they want to deal drugs out of your place or cause havoc, they're moving them along. They're saying, you can't come to my house anymore if you're going to do that, because you're going to get me kicked out, and then I'm no longer going to have a place to live. Right. We've done the same thing with Section 8 housing, where if you lose that Section 8 voucher, you lose it. There's no getting it back. So you don't get that benefit anymore. So holding people accountable for their actions has had some value. At the same time, it's encouraging property owners to find better tenants. Long-term tenants means you're making your profit better because you're not getting damaged. People are paying their rent. All those things go hand in hand. So it's basically re-educating our society to say, if you want to live here, and then you got to act accordingly. So that was been a huge benefit. And with the West End, we've got a couple areas in the West End. It's not the whole West End. It's some pockets of the West End. And I've changed the way we're formatting, the way we're approaching some of that stuff. Just recently reorganized my agency. I have 3 lieutenants now that are district commanders instead of platoon commanders. They used to be in charge of people. They're now in charge of a geographic area. And they have the department as their playground to go and address the issues in their district. So if there's an issue on 123 ABC Street that becomes a huge problem, that district commander is to find out how to solve that problem long term, not just immediate. So it's not just about that. So if there's a new business getting ready to go into an area and they're going to be clearing out an area of woods to put that business in, and homeless people are living there, it's not having that district commander just go in and make sure that they're removed. It's organizing with the homeless coalition and organizations to help them get them services, because they are going to be removed. But it's not just throwing them out and then having them move somewhere else and then cause those other issues. So we want to get away from just chasing the dragon and start really looking at long-term solutions to some of these problems that have been historically the same problems we've had in some of these areas for as long as I've been here.
So, Emily, this is for you. Hagerstown doesn't obviously operate in a vacuum. It's its own municipality, but can you talk about any interactions between the city council and the county government and even state delegates? Do you want to talk about that for a little bit? Is it going well? Because we've just had an election last year. We're about a year in after the last election. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the city and county government, generally speaking, we have a good relationship. We have done some 2x2 meetings where Shelley and I will meet with Court and Randy. Anytime more than 3 members of the body meet, it has to be a public meeting. So if we can meet 2 and 2, we can meet and really discuss issues and try to figure out how we can find resolution to it. We've really been working closely with them on the tax sale property. That's kind of our big one right now. And then for me, really working on the fire system. Our county fire system is failing, and it is extremely disappointing that they didn't make it a legislative priority this year. Budget-wise, it's a big deal for them, and it's a big deal for our citizens too, because we have a paid fire system to the tune of $9 million. So if anyone in the city has a fire, you have 15 paid people working 24 hours a day, every single day of the year. The county, with significantly bigger footprint to fill, pays about $9 million a year for their fire system because it's mostly volunteer. It's a huge issue and it affects us at the city, so we've really been trying to find resolution with that and to come up with a plan that is safe for our entire community. And with that, an issue that is probably the pain point between city government and county government is the tax differential. So people who live in the city of Hagerstown get a tax differential because we pay city and county taxes. Right now it's 11 cents. That was decided about 10 years ago and has not been reviewed since then. And in that calculation, our fire system's not even included in it. So it's not fair because we're already paying for fire. Our citizens are paying for water and wastewater through the city, but the county just took money out of their general fund to put into their water system. So why are my citizens paying twice? Things like that I think we need to look at, and they see it as us coming with our handout, and I guess we kind of are. But my job is to protect the taxpayers of the city of Hagerstown and to make sure that what we're paying is fair and the offset is fair. So of course that's going to be a pain point because I understand from a commissioner standpoint, they certainly don't want to say, hey, great, now we have to give the city $3 million more a year. Where are we going to come up with that? I understand they have to protect too, but it has to be fair, what is being paid. So I think that that's going to be continue to be a pain point. I will say we've had continual meetings with staff. We have the chart of where that calculation came from. We know exactly what's going into it. We know what we're paying, what the county's paying, and we have an agreement by all 5 members of the county and all 5 members of the city that we are going to review it and try to get to what's fair. Do I think we'll see any change? I mean, I'm optimistically hopeful, but I think it's going to be, that's a tough subject.
Okay.
It's a tough subject.
So I want to get to questions. I want to save time for that, but I do want to ask you both sort of one follow-on question or one slightly different question. So Hagerstown is much more diverse now than it was when I was growing up, like 30, 40 years ago. Or at least it seems. We have a lot more languages spoken. It was historically, I mean, from what I remember, it was very much a white community. Now it seems like there's much more African Americans, more Hispanics, even you see a lot more Muslims, things like that. So what are the challenges, and I guess what are you guys, because I even looked on your bio and I saw that, have to represent, all the people. So what are the challenges with a more diverse community now, both from a policing standpoint and really from a leadership standpoint, because understanding the needs of each one of those demographics and that we all maybe look at things a little bit differently. What are the challenges you guys are seeing, and are you doing anything differently with time?
Well, I will say you must be a dinosaur because when I was growing up here, I feel like it was not a white community. I feel like it was a diverse community. But
maybe I only had white friends. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think that's what makes Hagerstown beautiful. It's what makes Washington County beautiful is that we are very diverse. You can walk down the street and you see people of all different nationalities and religions and socioeconomic status and everything else. I think leadership for a very long time around here has looked one way, white male. I mean, that's a reality of it. It's our delegation. There's never been a woman in our delegation. There's only been 3 women county commissioners. There have been a handful of women city council members. But I think we really have to encourage diversity. But if you look at the United States as a whole, that's been the way that it is. I think we are finally getting to the point where we recognize differences of opinion is important, difference of perspective. So different races, different genders, different, how you identify sexually, all of that stuff is important. Those opinions matter and make a difference. So I think we just need to encourage people to come out and to participate and to volunteer and to make sure we're meeting people where they're at and that all communities feel welcome and that everyone feels welcome at the table. But I think that's what makes Hagerstown great is that we are diverse and you can walk around the different events that we have and see people from all walks of life.
Thanks for pointing out that I'm a lot older than you are.
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm a white community.
A lot older.
Anyway, Joey.
Challenge is probably not really the right word.
Maybe consideration.
For us, for the law enforcement field, it's being able to, as she said, you meet them where they are. So if I don't have a diverse law enforcement group, then I can't speak the language of the person that I'm supposed to be protecting and serving. So I'm very proud since I've taken over that the diversity of my agency is growing. I have the very first Muslim American police officer on the street today. He's from Lebanon. I have in the academy starting today a young man from Ghana, originally from Ghana, speaks Chinese, speaks 3 languages. My Muslim American officer, Officer Ehab, speaks 3 languages. He speaks Spanish and he speaks Muslim. He speaks obviously English. I have 2 Latino officers, the very first 2 that we've ever hired. One's on the street in field training, one's in the academy. Our female to male ratio is above the standard that's set by our accreditation standards that we have in the department. Our African American population is growing, so I'm very proud of that. Having that diversity isn't just about that service, but it teaches the people inside my building that difference in those cultures. So, and it also breaks down those biases that we all carry around with us and have grown up with and things like that. So I think I know what you were saying about feeling in a white community compared to a diverse community. I think what has happened in Hagerstown is that diversity has moved throughout the community. So where you had pockets of people living, it's very dispersed. Our Hispanic population, unlike other places like Frederick that have an area where mostly there's a lot of Hispanic people living, our Hispanic population lives throughout every part of our community. And the great thing about that model that we have here that just kind of happened that way here is that it keeps crime down. Where you think that it wouldn't, where people might be fearful of that. Let's use the Latino population. A lot of them won't report crimes against themselves because they're afraid of law enforcement coming in and doing something to them. Again, because of either the culture they were brought up in or they may be here illegally, those things, so they won't report it. Where Latino gangs come into those areas and they prey on that. We don't have Latino gangs here because our population is so dispersed and so integrated within our community that it actually makes our community safer.
And you make a good point with that because I probably that was kind of in the spirit of what I was trying to. It used to be it was almost more segregated in a way from what I remember, whereas now it's and I think we do have more folks coming from the DC area to Frederick and then moving out here. But you made a good point, and it kind of read into what you were talking about, the first ever Hispanics on the force, Muslims, which I always remember the police force being, not that I had a lot of experience with the police force, but it was mainly white males. But now I see a lot more, diversity with that. So, yeah.
I would just add, too, I think it takes leadership being thoughtful of the diversity. And I'll give an example. Someone reached out for Washington Goes Purple and said, you don't have anything in Spanish. And he was absolutely right. So we had Sela here in the community translate all of our materials, got them printed in Spanish, and then made sure we had that for the schools. Also for the Spanish festival, I made sure to take someone, I don't speak Spanish, so I took one of the Hagerstown firefighters who could translate for the whole festival for us. That was a mistake and a miss on our part, but something that I don't speak Spanish, so I didn't think about it. So I think it's just being thoughtful to other communities. Our civil rights scorecard for the city last year for LGBTQ was dreadful. And when it came back, we looked at it, and it turned out our city administrator didn't take the time, our old city administrator, just want to clarify that is no longer our city administrator, just didn't respond. So it's not even that our scorecard, we were not scored that low if she would have taken the time to respond, and we weren't even made aware of that until we're getting called by the press. That is completely unacceptable, because if you're a member of the LGBTQ community outside of Hagerstown, you don't know that scorecard was so low, not because we're a bunch of bigots, but because someone failed to respond to an email. That was a miss on her part. So this year we made sure that we answered. We have an LGBTQ liaison on the police force, on the city council, which is me, that our health benefits include same-sex marriage, include transgender. That we made sure to address things like that.
Who administers that scorecard? Is that
the human rights? Human Rights Committee
Okay.
campaign.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And we were doing that beforehand. We just didn't prove it or show it.
Right.
You know, we didn't. Our liaison, we had always had a liaison with the LGBTQ community. It used to be me, and then it moved to Lieutenant Fetchu, and we would do that, but we didn't have it posted on our website. We didn't have it formalized somewhere. So because it wasn't there, you couldn't prove it. So therefore, you got a lower score. So
That's just something so simple that
right.
in a leadership position you have to be mindful of
Sure,
that. That's
sure.
important.
I mean, we had in my police department a couple years ago, we had our very first intern that was transgender, and that was huge for us in a good way. I mean, when she came in, you know, I spoke to her and said, look, this is new, and I don't mean to be offensive in any way, shape, or form. So if anybody's offensive, or if we do anything that is offensive, please let us know so we can fix it, so we can kind of go down that path. And in talking to the LGBTQ community, at that time they were in the same boat. They didn't have any way to really advise me on what we should or shouldn't do. So I was just open and honest with her name's Mariah. I was open and honest with Mariah. I said, you know, please help me figure this out for my agency. And she stops back in routinely just to say hi and to say, you know, thank you for the opportunity for interning at the police department. She now works down in D.C. going to law school, and you know, has a really great job. And she touts the Hagerstown Police Department and that internship as being that start for her. I mean, she walked across the street from working at Roy Rogers, just walked in one day. He said, do you have an internship program? It's an unpaid internship program. And so we like, what's your skill set? And we put her to work, you know, so she come in, and she's been a huge ambassador for us, you know, as part of that. So
Good.
I've had her come back and speak at some of the youth organizations and stuff as well. So it's very much society where we are. We've always been, but I think we're a much more open society. And I agree. I think we don't get credit here in Hagerstown, and especially in Hagerstown, for being diverse. I don't think when anybody thinks about diversity, they think about Hagerstown, but it truly is a very diverse population that gets along.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't have those issues that a lot of places do, which is a credit. It's something we should be celebrating, and we tend to, and we talk about this all the time, we tend to beat ourselves up for the bad things about here, and we don't celebrate the good things that we have here. And there's far more good things in Hagerstown than there is bad things. And the bad
Right.
things are things that we're working on, and things that are fixable, and
Right.
things that can be managed. But you know, we follow in that naysayer mentality as a community in a large way, and it's unfortunate because you know, I've got people that are friends in the LGBTQ community that have friends that are wanting to move here, that want to move here because of what they see here, and what they hear from their own community. And I think you're going to see a lot of economic growth just in that one aspect of our population. I think you're going to see a growth in that aspect, and I welcome anybody who wants to come here and make Hagerstown better. I mean, I don't care where you're coming from.